My name is Lyra, and at 28, I thought I understood family loyalty. That was before my parents cornered me in my own living room, demanding I sign over the deed to my house, the one I had worked 3 jobs to afford, to my unemployed brother Marcus. Their reasoning? Family comes first, and he needs it more. What they did not know was that I had already discovered the real reason behind their sudden desperation. Sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones plotting your downfall. Before we dive deeper into this shocking family betrayal, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you have ever dealt with toxic family expectations, and subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. Trust me, you will want to see how this manipulation backfires in the most spectacular way possible. 3 weeks earlier, everything seemed normal. I was celebrating finally paying off my mortgage early, something I had worked towards since graduating college with a degree in software engineering. My tiny 2-bedroom house in suburban Portland might not look like much, but it represented 7 years of 60-hour work weeks, ramen dinners, and saying no to every vacation my friends took. The celebration was short-lived. It started with Marcus showing up unannounced, as usual. At 31, my older brother had perfected the art of appearing whenever he needed something. This time, he brought our parents, which should have been my first red flag. Mom clutched her purse like she was heading into battle, while Dad kept checking his phone nervously. "Lyra, sweetheart," Mom began, settling onto my couch without invitation. "We need to discuss your housing situation." I paused, coffee mug halfway to my lips. "My housing situation?" "Mom, I just finished paying off my mortgage. My housing situation has never been better." Dad cleared his throat. "That's actually what we wanted to talk about. See, Marcus has been having a rough time finding steady work, and with his girlfriend pregnant." "Pregnant?" I interrupted, looking at Marcus, who was suddenly very interested in his shoes. "Surprise," he mumbled. "Look, I know this is a lot to ask, but we were thinking, maybe you could help out family. You know, temporarily." The word temporarily hung in the air like a bad smell. I knew Marcus well enough to understand that his version of temporary meant permanent. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Mom leaned forward, her expression shifting into what I recognized as her manipulation mode. "Well, you are just one person in this big house. Marcus has a growing family to think about. It would be the right thing to do, the family thing to do, to let them have the house." I felt my blood pressure spike. "Let them have my house?" "Not let them," Dad corrected quickly. "We would work out some kind of arrangement. Maybe you could rent a nice apartment downtown, closer to your work. This house would be perfect for a family." The audacity hit me like a physical blow. They were not asking me to let Marcus move in temporarily. They were asking me to give up my home entirely. Are you all completely insane? I stood up, pacing to the window. This is my house. I worked my ass off for this house. I sacrificed everything for this house. Language, Lyra, Mom scolded automatically. And do not be so dramatic. Family helps family. When your grandmother left us that money. Stop right there. I whirled around. Grandmother left that money to me specifically for my education and future. Not for Marcus to blow on his failed business ventures. Marcus finally looked up, his face flushed. That's not fair. You have always been the golden child. You got the scholarships, the good grades, the career. Some of us were not born perfect. The familiar guilt trip almost worked. Almost. But something in Dad's nervous fidgeting caught my attention. He kept glancing at Marcus with an expression I could not quite read, part desperation, part fear. That night, after they left with promises to continue this conversation later, I could not sleep. Something felt wrong beyond their outrageous request. In my family, demands this bold usually meant someone was hiding something bigger. I decided to do what I did best, research. It started innocently enough. I was curious about Marcus's mysterious pregnant girlfriend, whom none of us had met. A quick Facebook search led me to her profile, Jessica Chen, 24, with a very public pregnancy announcement from 2 months ago. But as I scrolled through her photos, my blood ran cold. There was Marcus, all right. But there were also photos with another man, photos dated during the same time period, with captions like "Date night with my baby daddy" and "Cannot wait to start our family." My brother was not the father. But that discovery was nothing compared to what I found next. Digging deeper into Marcus's social media, I found posts about his new investment opportunity. Apparently, he had convinced several people to invest in his latest business venture. A food truck operation that was supposed to launch last month. The problem? Based on the angry comments from investors, the food truck did not exist. Marcus had collected nearly $50,000 from friends and acquaintances, promising massive returns that would never materialize. My hand shook as I screenshotted everything. This was not just family drama anymore. This was fraud. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Marcus needed to disappear, fast, before his victims figured out how to take legal action. What better way than to move into his sister's house, claim he was helping with family responsibilities, and lay low until the heat died down? And our parents? I found my answer in Dad's email, which I accessed using the password he had been using since I was 15. There were frantic messages between him and Marcus, discussing damage control and keeping the family together. Dad knew about the fraud. Mom probably did too. They were not just asking me to give up my house for Marcus's convenience. They were asking me to become an unwitting accomplice in helping him escape the consequences of his crimes. I sat in my kitchen until dawn, staring at the evidence spread across my laptop screen. My own family was willing to sacrifice my financial security, my home, and my future to protect my criminal brother. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had decided I was expendable. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated exactly how far I was willing to go to protect myself. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. I needed time to process what I had discovered and, more importantly, to plan my response. The naive part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to demand explanations and apologies. But 7 years in the tech industry had taught me the value of strategic thinking. Instead, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to my friend Sarah, who worked as a private investigator. We had met in college and stayed close despite our different career paths. When I explained the situation, carefully omitting the illegal aspects, she agreed to help me dig deeper into Marcus's recent activities. "Girl, this smells like a setup from space," she said. "Give me 48 hours. I will find out what your brother has been up to." The second call was to my bank. I spoke with my financial advisor about protecting my assets. Hypothetically, I said, if someone were pressuring me to transfer property ownership, what safeguards could I put in place? The conversation was eye-opening. Apparently, financial coercion within families was more common than I realized. My advisor walked me through several protective measures, including the option to place my property in a trust that would make any forced transfer legally impossible. The third call was the most important. I contacted Emma Rodriguez, the lawyer who had handled my mortgage paperwork. Emma was sharp, experienced, and had a reputation for not backing down from difficult family cases. "Lyra, I remember you," she said warmly. "Congratulations on paying off that mortgage early. What can I do for you?" I explained the situation, including my suspicions about Marcus's activities. Emma listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. "This is more serious than family drama," she said finally. "If your brother is involved in investment fraud, your parents could be considered accessories if they are helping him hide assets or avoid consequences. And if they are pressuring you to transfer property to facilitate this, that could constitute additional crimes." What are my options? Several. First, we document everything. Every conversation, every demand, every threat. Second, we protect your assets immediately. And third. She paused. Well, third depends on how far you are willing to take this. What do you mean? If your brother has defrauded investors, those people deserve to get their money back. The authorities need to know what he has done. The question is whether you are prepared to be the one who reports your own family. I stared out my window at the garden I had spent 3 years cultivating. Every plant, every stone, every decision about this property had been mine. The thought of losing it to protect a criminal made my stomach turn. I need to think about it. Of course. But Lyra? Do not let family loyalty blind you to what is right. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. That afternoon, Sarah called back with preliminary findings that made my blood run cold. Marcus had not just scammed investors for his fake food truck business. Over the past year, he had borrowed money from at least 12 different people, using various sob stories and false promises. The total was approaching $100,000. It gets worse, Sarah continued. I found posts in a private Facebook group where some of his victims are organizing. They have figured out he lied to them, and they are planning to confront him this week. A couple of them mentioned going to the police. The timeline suddenly made sense. Marcus did not just need a place to live, he needed to disappear before his entire world collapsed. There is something else, Sarah said. That girlfriend of his? Jessica? She has no idea about any of this. I reached out to her through a mutual friend. She thinks Marcus is some kind of tech entrepreneur with a startup. She has no clue about the fraud, and she definitely does not know he has been telling people the baby is his. My heart actually ached for this woman. She was about to become a single mother, believing she had a supportive partner, while the man she trusted was using her pregnancy as a prop in his escape plan. That evening, my parents returned for what Dad called a family meeting. This time, they brought backup, my Uncle Jerry, who had always been the family's unofficial mediator. Lyra, honey, Uncle Jerry started, your parents explained the situation. I know this seems like a big ask, but family takes care of family. Your brother made some mistakes, but that does not mean we abandon him. What kind of mistakes? I asked innocently. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Business setbacks, Mom said carefully. You know how entrepreneurship can be unpredictable. Unpredictable like promising investors a food truck business that never existed? The silence in the room was deafening. Dad's face went pale, while Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish. How did you, Marcus started, then caught himself. How did I what, Marcus? How did I find out you defrauded dozens of people? How did I discover you have been lying to your pregnant girlfriend? Or how did I realize our parents are asking me to sacrifice my home to help you escape the consequences of your crimes? Uncle Jerry looked genuinely shocked. Crimes? What crimes? For the next 10 minutes, I laid out everything I had discovered. The fraudulent business venture, the stolen money, the lies about the baby, the victims who were organizing to get justice. I showed them screenshots, bank records, and social media evidence. This is not family helping family, I concluded. This is asking me to become an accessory to fraud. Marcus finally exploded. You self-righteous bitch. You have always thought you were better than the rest of us. God forbid you actually help your family for once instead of hoarding everything for yourself. Help my family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marcus, you stole $100,000 from innocent people. You lied to a pregnant woman about being the father of her child. You manipulated our parents into pressuring me to give up my home. At what point in this story am I the villain? Dad stood up abruptly. That is enough. Lyra, we raised you to be loyal to this family. Your grandmother would be ashamed of your selfishness. The invocation of my grandmother, The woman who had specifically left me money for my future because she worried about my parents' financial irresponsibility, was the final straw. You want to talk about what Grandma would think? I stood too, feeling calmer than I had in days. Let me tell you what she would think about her son pressuring her granddaughter to give up her home to protect a criminal. I walked to my front door and held it open. Get out. All of you. And do not come back until you are ready to have an honest conversation about making this right. As they filed out, muttering threats and accusations, I felt something I had not expected: relief. For the first time in my life, I had chosen my own well-being over my family's dysfunction. The next few days passed in tense silence. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits, just radio silence from my family. I used the quiet to fortify my position, and what I discovered during those 72 hours would prove to be game-changing. Emma, my lawyer, had been busy. She called Wednesday morning with updates that made my head spin. I have good news and complicated news, she began. The good news is that I have already filed the necessary paperwork to protect your property. As of yesterday, your house is held in an irrevocable trust that makes any coerced transfer legally impossible. Even if someone forged your signature, the transfer would be void. And the complicated news? I did some research into your brother's activities. Lyra, this is bigger than we thought. Much bigger. I found records indicating he has been running similar scams for almost 3 years, across multiple states. We are not talking about a desperate man making one bad choice. This is a pattern of systematic fraud. My stomach dropped. How is that possible? How did no one catch this sooner? He was smart about it. Different names, different stories, always targeting people who were unlikely to compare notes. Small amounts from each victim, just under the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting. But the pattern is clear once you know what to look for. Emma paused, and I could hear papers rustling. There is something else. I reached out to a contact in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They have been tracking someone matching your brother's description and methods. They would very much like to speak with you. The words hit me like a physical blow. FBI. Federal crimes. This was not family drama anymore, this was serious criminal activity with real victims and real consequences. What does that mean for me? It means you have a choice to make. You can continue trying to handle this as a family matter, hoping Marcus stops on his own, or you can help law enforcement put an end to his crime spree before more people get hurt. I thought about Jessica, the pregnant woman who believed she had found her partner for life. I thought about the investors who had trusted Marcus with their savings, money they probably could not afford to lose. I thought about future victims who had no idea they were walking into a trap. Set up the meeting. That afternoon, I met with Special Agent Patricia Kim at a coffee shop downtown. She was younger than I expected, probably close to my age, with an intensity that made me understand why people confessed things to law enforcement. Ms. Lyra, I want to thank you for reaching out. Your brother has been on our radar for 18 months, but we have struggled to build a comprehensive case because his victims are scattered across different jurisdictions. She opened a tablet and showed me a map dotted with red pins. Each pin represents a confirmed victim. As you can see, he started in California, moved through Nevada and Arizona, and arrived in Oregon about 8 months ago. There were dozens of pins. Dozens of people whose lives Marcus had damaged for his personal gain. The pattern is consistent, Agent Kim continued. He targets people going through difficult transitions, recent divorces, job losses, deaths in the family. People who are vulnerable and desperate for hope. He promises them investment opportunities that sound too good to be true because they are. How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate? $300,000. But we think it could be closer to $500,000. The number made me dizzy. Marcus was not just a scammer, he was a predator who specialized in exploiting human suffering. What do you need from me? Right now, just information. But if this goes to trial, we might need you to testify about his attempts to use your property to hide assets. Are you prepared for that possibility? I thought about my parents' faces when I had confronted them, the way they had chosen Marcus's lies over my well-being without hesitation. Yes. I will do whatever it takes to stop him. Agent Kim smiled for the first time since we had met. Good. Because based on what you have told us about your family pressuring you to transfer property, we might be looking at additional charges related to asset concealment and conspiracy. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, I had provided detailed accounts of every conversation, every demand, and every threat my family had made. Agent Kim seemed particularly interested in my parents' knowledge of Marcus's activities. Family members who knowingly help hide criminal proceeds can be charged as accessories, she explained. If your parents knew about the fraud and were helping Marcus avoid consequences, they could face serious legal repercussions. Walking back to my car, I felt the weight of what I had just set in motion. I was not just refusing to help Marcus anymore, I was actively working to ensure he faced justice. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, emergency. Call me now. I called immediately. What happened? Your brother just showed up at Jessica's apartment with 2 suitcases and a story about needing to lay low for a while. She called me because she did not know what else to do. Is she okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally? She is a mess. Lyra, he told her that you had threatened to call the police on him out of family jealousy. He is spinning this whole thing like you are the villain trying to destroy his life because you are bitter about his success. The manipulation was so perfectly Marcus that I almost admired its audacity. Of course he would paint himself as the victim of my jealousy rather than the architect of his own downfall. Where is he now? Still at her place, trying to convince her to let him move in permanently. She is 8 months pregnant and scared, which makes her exactly the kind of vulnerable target he specializes in. I made a decision that surprised even me. Give me her address. I am going over there. Lyra, are you sure that is a good idea? If Marcus sees you. If Marcus sees me, he will realize his time is up. Which is exactly the message I want to send. 20 minutes later, I stood outside Jessica's apartment complex, gathering my courage. Through a first-floor window, I could see Marcus pacing around what looked like a small living room, gesturing animatedly. Jessica sat on a couch, one hand on her pregnant belly, looking overwhelmed. I knocked on the door. Jessica answered, looking exactly like her photos but more tired and confused. Behind her, I heard Marcus's voice stop mid-sentence. Hi, I said gently. You do not know me, but I am Lyra, Marcus's sister. I think we need to talk. Jessica's eyes widened. You are the sister who threatened to destroy his life. Let me guess what he told you. I kept my voice calm and compassionate. Jessica, I am not here to hurt anyone. But you deserve to know the truth about the man you are planning to build a life with. Marcus appeared behind her, his face cycling through surprise, anger, and calculation. Lyra, what the hell are you doing here? Jessica, do not listen to her. She is here to cause trouble. I looked directly at Jessica, ignoring Marcus completely. Did he tell you about the FBI investigation? About the hundreds of thousands of dollars he stole from investors? About the fact that he is not the father of your baby? Jessica's face went white. What? Lyra, shut your mouth right now, Marcus snarled, but there was panic in his voice. Jessica, I have documentation of everything. I have proof that he has been running investment scams for years. I have evidence that he lied about the paternity of your child. And I have witnesses who can verify that my family has been pressuring me to give him my house so he can hide from the people he defrauded. Jessica looked between Marcus and me, her hand moving protectively over her belly. Marcus? Is this true? For a moment, I thought he might actually confess. His shoulders slumped, and he looked more defeated than I had ever seen him. Then his expression hardened, and he made the choice that would seal his fate. Baby, she is lying. She has always hated me, and now she is trying to turn you against me too. Do not let her poison you with her jealousy. Jessica turned back to me, uncertainty written across her features. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder. Jessica, I would rather you heard this from him, but since he is going to keep lying, here is the proof. What happened next would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. But that confrontation was just the beginning of his downfall. Would you like me to continue with parts 5 to 7? This is getting really intense and I want to make sure the story maintains its momentum through the climax and resolution. I handed Jessica the folder, watching as she opened it with trembling hands. The first document was a printout of the pregnancy announcement from her real boyfriend's social media. The man Marcus had convinced her to take a break from 3 months ago. This is David, I said quietly. Your actual boyfriend. The father of your baby. Jessica's hands shook as she read the posts. Photos of David talking excitedly about becoming a father, posts about missing her, confusion about why she had suddenly stopped responding to his messages. You blocked him, didn't you? I asked gently. Marcus probably told you David was trying to manipulate you or that he was not ready for fatherhood. Tears spilled down Jessica's cheeks. He said David was just trying to trap me. That he would leave once the baby came. Marcus lunged forward, trying to grab the folder. These are fake. She doctored these photos to make me look bad. I stepped between them, my voice steel cold. Jessica, keep reading. The next section shows the bank transfers from his victims. 57 people, Marcus. 57 people who trusted you with their savings. As Jessica flipped through pages of evidence, her expression shifted from confusion to horror to rage. Bank statements, social media screenshots, investor agreements for businesses that never existed, it was all there. $500,000, she whispered. You stole $500,000. I didn't steal anything. Marcus's voice cracked. These are investments. Sometimes investments don't work out. Investments in what? Jessica stood up, her voice rising. Food trucks that don't exist? Tech companies that were never incorporated? Marcus, this document shows you promised the same investors 3 different businesses with the same money. I watched Marcus realize his web of lies was finally collapsing. He looked around the small apartment like a trapped animal, and I could see the exact moment he decided to go all in on one final manipulation. Baby, please, he said, his voice shifting to the gentle tone I remembered from our childhood when he wanted something from our parents. I know this looks bad, but I can explain everything. Yes, some investments failed, but that's business. And yes, I lied about the baby's father, but only because I love you so much that I want to be that baby's father. For a moment, I thought his practiced charm might work. Jessica's anger wavered, replaced by the confusion of someone who had believed she was loved. Then she found the final section of my folder. What is this? She asked, holding up a printed email exchange. I had debated including those messages, but I knew Jessica needed to see who Marcus really was. Read it out loud. Jessica's voice was hollow as she read Marcus's email to a friend from 2 weeks ago, found the perfect mark, pregnant chick who's desperate for a father figure. She's got a decent apartment and a savings account. Told her I'm the baby daddy and she believes it. Should be good for a few months of free rent while this investor thing blows over. Might even be able to get her to lend me money for the baby. These emotional types are so easy to manipulate. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica stood frozen, the email trembling in her hands. Marcus opened and closed his mouth like a fish, finally realizing there was no lie smooth enough to cover this betrayal. Get out. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. Baby, I can explain. Get out, she screamed, and the pain in her voice made my heart break for her. Get out of my home. Get away from me. Get away from my baby. Marcus looked at me with pure hatred. This is all your fault. Everything was fine until you decided to destroy our family. Our family was destroyed the moment you decided to become a criminal, I replied calmly. I just refuse to be your next victim. As Marcus gathered his suitcases, muttering threats and curses, Jessica sank back onto her couch, sobbing. I sat beside her, offering tissues and quiet support. How could I be so stupid, she cried. You're not stupid. You're a kind person who wanted to believe the best in someone. That's not a character flaw, it's what makes you human. After Marcus slammed out of the apartment, I helped Jessica call David. The conversation was tearful and complicated, but within an hour, he was on his way over with flowers and apologies for whatever misunderstanding had driven them apart. As I prepared to leave, Jessica grabbed my hand. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you enough. Take care of yourself and that baby, I said. And if Marcus tries to contact you again, call me immediately. Driving home, I felt emotionally drained but oddly satisfied. One of Marcus's victims had been saved, and the truth was finally coming to light. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Agent Kim's name appeared on the screen. Lyra, we've been busy today. Based on your information, we executed search warrants on your brother's apartment and vehicle. We found evidence linking him to at least 40 additional victims across 6 states. 40 more? The scope of this fraud is staggering. We also found communications suggesting he was planning to flee the country using your property as collateral for a loan to fund his escape. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? He had been researching how to use property ownership as collateral for quick cash loans. If you had transferred your house to him, he would have immediately borrowed against it and disappeared, leaving you responsible for a debt on property you no longer owned. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. Marcus had not just wanted my house, he had planned to use it to fund his escape while destroying my financial future in the process. Agent Kim, what happens now? Now we arrest him. We've located him at a motel about 20 minutes from your location. Do you want to be there when it happens? The question surprised me. Part of me wanted to see Marcus finally face consequences for his actions. But another part of me just wanted this nightmare to be over. No, I decided. I've done what I needed to do. Justice taking its course is enough for me. Understood. Lyra, I want you to know that your cooperation has likely saved dozens of future victims. You should be proud of the courage it took to do the right thing. As I hung up the phone and walked into my house, which would remain mine, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the truth was finally out. Sadness for the family relationships that had been irreparably damaged. Anger at the betrayal and manipulation I had endured. But mostly, I felt something I had not expected, peace. For the first time in weeks, I was not looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next demand or manipulation. The people who had tried to sacrifice my well-being for their convenience were about to learn that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. News alert says FBI arrested major fraud suspect at local motel. Feeling proud of my badass friend right now. I smiled, poured myself a glass of wine, and settled into my favorite chair in my living room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, family confrontations, possible testimony, the complex work of rebuilding trust with people who had betrayed me. But tonight, I was home. Safe, secure, and finally free from the weight of other people's expectations. The doorbell rang, interrupting my moment of peace. Through the peephole, I saw my parents' car in the driveway. Round 2 was about to begin. My parents stood on my doorstep looking like they had aged 10 years in the past week. Dad's usually perfect hair was disheveled, and Mom's makeup could not hide the dark circles under her eyes. Behind them, I spotted Uncle Jerry sitting in their car, apparently serving as backup once again. We need to talk, Dad said without preamble. I considered refusing, sending them away like I had before. But the exhaustion in their faces told me something had fundamentally changed. The news of Marcus's arrest had clearly reached them. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "But this conversation happens on my terms in my house." They followed me into the living room, moving like people in shock. Mom perched on the edge of the couch as if she might need to flee at any moment. Dad remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides. "The FBI came to our house this morning," Mom said without preamble, her voice hollow. "They asked us about our knowledge of Marcus's activities," Dad continued. "About the conversations we had with you regarding the house transfer." I settled into my chair, maintaining eye contact. "And what did you tell them?" "The truth," Dad said quietly. "That we knew Marcus was in trouble, but we did not understand the scope of what he had done." "Did not understand?" I kept my voice level. "Dad, I showed you bank statements. I showed you evidence of fraud. You saw the screenshots of him lying to Jessica about being the father of her baby. What part of that did you not understand?" Mom broke down then, tears flowing freely. "We thought you were exaggerating. Marcus told us you had always been jealous of his entrepreneurial spirit, that you were trying to sabotage him because you could not stand to see him succeed. And you believed him. Even when I provided proof." "He's our son," Dad said, as if that explained everything. "We wanted to believe there was some explanation that made sense." "I'm your daughter," I replied. "Did that count for nothing when you demanded I give up my home?" The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unaddressed family dynamics. Finally, Dad sank into a chair, looking older than I had ever seen him. "The FBI agent said Marcus has been stealing from people for 3 years. 3 years, Lyra. All those times he asked us for small loans, told us about business setbacks that were just temporary, he was lying about everything. They said he stole over $500,000, Mom whispered. $500,000 from people who trusted him." I watched my parents grapple with the reality of who their golden child had become. Part of me felt satisfaction at their devastation, but a larger part just felt sad for the family we could have been if honesty had mattered more than loyalty. "There's more," Dad continued. "The agent said Marcus was planning to use your house as collateral for a loan to fund his escape from the country. If you had signed over the property, he would have immediately borrowed against it and disappeared. Leaving me responsible for a debt on property I no longer owned," I finished. "I know. Agent Kim told me." Mom looked up sharply. "You knew? You knew and you didn't warn us?" The accusation hit me like a slap. "Warn you about what, exactly?" "That the son you were helping hide from law enforcement was planning to commit additional crimes? You made your choice when you decided to pressure me instead of holding him accountable." "We never meant for you to get hurt," Dad protested. "But you were perfectly willing to let me get hurt if it meant protecting Marcus," I replied. "You asked me to sacrifice my financial security, my home, my future, all to help a criminal escape consequences." Uncle Jerry chose that moment to knock on the door and let himself in. He looked around the room, taking in the tear-stained faces and obvious tension. "I've been listening to the news," he said heavily. "Federal charges. Investment fraud. They're saying he could get 20 years. 20 years, Mom repeated numbly. The FBI agent also mentioned possible charges for family members who helped conceal assets," Jerry continued, not looking at my parents. "She said anyone who knowingly assisted in hiding criminal proceeds could face prosecution as accessories." Dad's face went pale. "We didn't know." "You knew enough," I interrupted. "You knew he was in serious trouble. You knew he needed to disappear quickly. You knew he had lied to multiple people about money. But you decided to help him anyway." My phone buzzed with a text from Emma, my lawyer. "Saw the news. Are you okay? Call me if you need anything." "I need you all to leave now," I said, standing up. "I'm emotionally exhausted, and this conversation isn't productive for anyone. Mom looked up at me with desperate eyes. Lyra, we're family. We make mistakes, but we're still family. Your father and I. We were just trying to hold everyone together. By asking me to tear my life apart, I replied. Mom, you raised me to work hard, to be responsible, to build something meaningful with my life. I did exactly what you taught me. And when it came time to choose between rewarding that or enabling Marcus's criminal behavior, you chose Marcus. He's sick, she said, grasping for any explanation that might make sense. People don't steal that much money unless something is wrong with them. Maybe he is sick, I agreed. But that doesn't change the fact that you were willing to sacrifice my well-being to manage his sickness. That's not love, Mom. That's dysfunction. Dad finally spoke up, his voice barely audible. What do we do now? Now you live with the consequences of your choices, I said. Just like I've had to live with the consequences of mine. The difference is, my choices were about protecting myself. Yours were about enabling a criminal. As they prepared to leave, Dad turned back to me one more time. Will you visit him? In prison? The question caught me off guard. I thought about Marcus in a federal prison, finally facing real consequences for his actions. I thought about the dozens of victims who would never get their money back, the lives he had damaged, the trust he had destroyed. No, I said finally. I won't be visiting him. And if you're smart, you'll focus on cooperating with the FBI investigation instead of trying to maintain your loyalty to someone who was willing to destroy all of us to save himself. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, processing the reality that my family as I had known it was effectively over. Marcus would likely spend the next 2 decades in federal prison. My parents might face criminal charges themselves. The relationships that had defined my first 28 years of life were irreparably broken. But as I looked around my home, the home I had worked so hard for, the home I had successfully defended, I realized something important. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destruction. Sometimes protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And sometimes the family that matters most is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. 6 months later, I sat in Emma's law office reviewing the final documents that would close this chapter of my life forever. Marcus had been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to 47 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The victims' restitution fund had recovered roughly 60% of the stolen money, not perfect, but better than anyone had hoped. Your parents avoided criminal charges, Emma informed me, sliding a document across her desk. The prosecutors decided they were manipulated rather than willing conspirators. But they did have to forfeit the $15,000 Marcus had given them, which was traced to victim funds. I nodded, unsurprised. My parents had been naive and enabling, but they weren't criminal masterminds. The past 6 months had been hard on them. Dad had taken early retirement after the stress-triggered heart problems, and Mom had started therapy to work through what she called the guilt of choosing the wrong child. Have you spoken to them recently? Emma asked gently. Last week, I admitted. Dad called to tell me he's been attending a support group for families of incarcerated people. He's starting to understand the difference between love and enablement. It was progress, but slow progress. Trust, once broken so fundamentally, didn't rebuild overnight. Maybe it never would completely. But for the first time, my parents seemed committed to understanding their role in the family dysfunction rather than just managing its consequences. What about Jessica and David? That news brought my first genuine smile of the day. They got married last month. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Their daughter Emma is absolutely beautiful. 4 months old and already ruling the household. Jessica had become an unexpected friend throughout this ordeal. We had bonded over the shared experience of Marcus's manipulation, but our relationship had grown into something deeper. She was funny, resilient, and had an engineer's mind for solving problems. David was equally wonderful, kind, stable, and devoted to his new family. They asked me to be Emma's godmother, I added, still amazed by the honor. That's beautiful, Emma said warmly. You saved that family. We saved each other, I corrected. Emma gathered the papers and smiled. So what's next for you? Well, I said, pulling out my phone to show her a photo. I'm renovating the second bedroom into a home office. My company approved permanent remote work, so I'm thinking about freelancing part-time and maybe starting my own consulting business. That sounds perfect for you. And, I continued, feeling slightly nervous about sharing this next part, I've been dating someone. Emma's eyebrows shot up with interest. Oh? His name is Alex. We met at a coffee shop 3 months ago. He was reading the same programming book I had just finished. He's a teacher, completely stable and normal. No criminal history, no family drama, no secret schemes. Sounds revolutionary, Emma laughed. It really is. He knows about everything that happened with Marcus, and his response was to be impressed by how I handled it rather than concerned about the family chaos. It's nice being with someone who sees standing up for yourself as a strength rather than a character flaw. As I left Emma's office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The legal nightmare was finally over, and I was free to focus on building the life I actually wanted rather than managing other people's problems. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, dinner tonight? I have news about the documentary. That was another unexpected development. A filmmaker had approached me about participating in a documentary about family financial fraud. Initially, I had been hesitant about making my story public, but the more I learned about how common these situations were, the more I felt obligated to help others recognize the warning signs. See you at 7, I texted back. That evening, Sarah and I met at our favorite restaurant, the same place where I had first told her about my suspicions regarding Marcus. The documentary producer wants to feature your story as the central narrative, she said, barely containing her excitement. They think your experience perfectly illustrates how family manipulation can escalate into criminal conspiracy. Are you sure I want to be the poster child for family dysfunction? I asked, though I was secretly pleased by the validation. Think about it this way, how many people are dealing with family members who demand financial sacrifices to cover up bad behavior? How many people need permission to prioritize their own well-being over family loyalty? Your story could help them realize they're not selfish for setting boundaries. She had a point. Over the past months, I had been amazed by how many people had shared similar experiences when they learned about my situation. Adult children pressured to bail out financially irresponsible parents, siblings expected to cover for criminal relatives, spouses manipulated into hiding assets for illegal activities. The pattern was disturbingly common. Okay, I decided. Let's do it. As we talked through the documentary details, I reflected on how much my life had changed. 6 months ago, I had been consumed by family drama, constantly managing other people's emotions and crises. Now, I woke up each morning in my own home, worked on projects I found meaningful, and spent time with people who valued honesty over harmony. The hardest part hadn't been cutting ties with Marcus. He had made that choice easy with his behavior. The hardest part had been accepting that loving my parents didn't require sacrificing my well-being for their comfort. There's something else, Sarah said, pulling me back to the present. Jessica and David want to throw you a birthday party next month. Nothing big, just the people who matter most to you. I thought about that phrase, the people who matter most. A year ago, that list would have included my entire extended family, people who shared my DNA but not my values. Now it included Jessica, David, baby Emma, Sarah, Alex, Emma my lawyer, even Agent Kim, who had become a friend after the case closed. My chosen family was smaller than my biological one, but it was built on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care rather than obligation and guilt. That sounds perfect, I said. Later that night, as I sat in my living room with Alex, I watched him play with the cat I had recently adopted, a rescue named Justice, because I apparently had a sense of humor about my life experiences. "Do you ever regret it?" Alex asked, looking up from where Justice was purring in his lap. "Standing up to your family?" I considered the question seriously. Did I regret losing relationships that had shaped my entire life? Did I regret the pain my choice had caused, even to people who had hurt me? No, I said finally. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my family chose loyalty to dysfunction over love for truth. But I don't regret protecting myself. Even knowing what it cost? Alex, what it cost was the illusion of a healthy family. What I gained was actual peace, genuine relationships, and self-respect. That's not a trait I would undo. He nodded, understanding completely. That was what I loved about Alex, he didn't need me to justify my boundaries or apologize for my choices. As I write this story today, exactly 1 year after that first devastating conversation in my living room, I want to share something important with everyone watching. Family loyalty is beautiful when it flows both ways, when it protects the vulnerable and upholds justice. But when family loyalty requires you to enable harm, hide crimes, or sacrifice your well-being for someone else's comfort, it stops being love and becomes dysfunction. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, even if those people share your DNA. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in destruction. Sometimes standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And sometimes the family that matters most is the one that chooses you back. Have you ever faced a situation where family loyalty conflicted with doing the right thing? How did you handle the pressure to enable someone's harmful behavior? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama and life lessons. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate your own family challenges with courage and wisdom. Remember, you deserve relationships built on respect, not obligation.